All right, Friday afternoon drinks here at Sadler's Creek, everybody. My name's Brett, I'm the winemaker here at Sadler's Creek, and today we're going to go and get blended. To start with, what we're going to do is we're going to go through a collection of wines that we have in the cellar door that are blends already in their nature. They've been blended at different times of their life, some of them in the vineyard, some of them in the winery, some early in the winemaking process, some late in the winemaking process, and then afterwards what we're going to do is we're going to grab some samples out of the barrels in the winery and we're going to sit down and get blended. All right, so the very first wine that I've poured for you already is our Sadler's Chardonnay. Now this wine is 100% Hunter Valley Chardonnay. It's all from 2019 and it's all Chardonnay, but it's a blend. Does anyone care to have a punt on what makes this single varietal, single region, single vintage wine a blend? So it's straight Chardonnay, straight Hunter Valley, straight 2019, but it's a blend of vineyards. So when it comes to blending, we don't have to necessarily think about just blending different varietals together or different regions together. It can occur as different blocks or different vineyards. So in this case, our Hunter Valley Chardonnay is sourced from two different vineyards here in the Hunter Valley. One's the Oakey Creek Vineyard, which is owned by the Drayton's family winery, which is over on Oakey Creek Road, about 5 kilometres from here in a straight line. And the other vineyard that the fruit's sourced from is from the Ryan Estate, which is about 500 or 600 metres up the road. Now those two vineyards, they're grown on quite different soil. Over on the Oakey Creek Vineyard, it's a little bit more sandy over there. They grow a lot of Semillon on that vineyard as well, on the low flats. And what that does is actually allows for moisture to run away. What that leads to in that vineyard is a bit of a smaller canopy. The bunches are smaller, the berries are smaller. So you get a more concentrated flavour in the wine. Whereas the Ryan Vineyard, which is just up the road here, it's up on a hill. So it's a little bit more stony and a little bit more earthy in the ground. Basically what you're getting is more loam and more limestone and red soil, so you get quite a rich flavoured style of fruit off that as well. Now we picked those two parcels of fruit in a slightly different method. The fruit from the Oakey Creek Vineyard was machine harvested in the middle of the night, so we deliberately do that in the evening when it's cool, so that the fruit can then be brought to the winery and put through old Bertha behind us, our old airbag press. So what we do is we tip the fruit into the stainless steel hopper at the top, and the fruit goes into the cylinder, and on the inside of there is a round airbag down the centre. We put the doors on and we inflate the airbag and squash those grapes up against the wall of the press, and then the juice is then drained out into the tray that you can't see, but it's behind the barrels behind me. The only difference with that and the Ryan Estate fruit is that it's hand-picked. Now, the vineyard at Phil's place is smaller, the vines are a little bit older as well, and because of the crop load, it's a little bit more spread out. So to put a machine harvester through that vineyard wouldn't be as cost-effective because of the size of the vineyard, so we choose to hand-pick that fruit. That also helps protect the vineyard itself. That fruit's then brought in, and same process, whole bunch pressed, berries or bunches into the press and then off into juice stage. So with these wines, or the juice and the grapes, we keep it separate for the majority of its life. So the Chardonnay is, or the batches of Chardonnay are harvested. This is Ryan's Estate, and this is Oakey Creek Vineyard, for example, or we might have Chardonnay from Tumbarumba that we'll look at next. And we keep those as separate wines, and we individually look after those as they go through their winemaking process. It comes till about September, so this time of the year, where we would then look to blend those wines together in order to make the best possible wine that we can make. So the next wine, what we might look at, is our Alessandro Reserve Chardonnay, and I'll put in the glass next to this one. This is from the 2018 vintage, and this is half Hunter Valley, half Tumbarumba. So this one's, I guess, a little bit more obvious in the fact that it's a blend, because the fruit is sourced from two distinct different regions. So Hunter Valley, local, and the fruit for this vineyard, for this wine, came from those same two vineyards that we were just talking about for our Sadler's Chardonnay. but the other half of the wine, or the other half of the fruit, came from an area called Tumbarumba, which is down near the snowy fields. So it's on the western side of the Snowy Mountains, down towards the Victoria border. If you know where Tumut is, it's about half an hour, 40 minutes further south from there. The two climates for these grapes, and therefore wine, is very different. The Hunter Valley here is quite warm. It's low altitude in comparison. We're only sitting at under 100 metres above sea level here, whereas Tumbarumba is quite high. The vineyards go up to about 700 metres above sea level, and the area is quite steep. Now, because of that and the nature of that region, it's a lot cooler. And it's not necessarily a lot cooler during the day, because they can get hot weather, 35 degrees, those sorts of normal summer temperatures that we would see here in the Hunter Valley. Of course, we tend to get a few 40s as well. It's the night time that's very much the driver for this cool climate. What happens is during the night, especially because the region is so steep, is the air chills down very rapidly. And as that cool air rushes into the valleys, the fruit is grown effectively in a refrigerator. It slows down the ripening period, and it makes the resulting grapes and the resulting wines much more delicate and much lighter. So this style of wine, you'll notice, is a little bit softer in the mouth. It's also a little bit more linear, so it's quite straight down the middle of the palate, compared to the previous Chardonnay, which was a bit richer and a bit rounder. So this wine is a blend, as I said, 50% Hunter Valley and 50% Tumbarumba. And why did we decide to do that? Because it tastes good at the end of the day. We started sourcing Chardonnay from Tumbarumba back in 2016, which the reason for that is our hand was sort of forced in the fact that Mother Nature didn't play too nicely here in the Hunter Valley in 2016. So some of our Chardonnay vineyards or crop in this region was knocked out by hail, and because of that we then had to go and source fruit elsewhere. Now the rest of the Hunter Valley had experienced the same thing. So it's hard to go and source fruit in the Hunter Valley if it doesn't exist. So thankfully we have a long-standing relationship with a gent by the name of Phil Ryan, who used to be the head winemaker up at Mount Pleasant. And he has a network of friends and whatnot in the industry, and he was able to find us someone to go and network with and source some fruit. So that was back in 2016, and we've been sourcing Chardonnay from there ever since. All right, so we've had... So we've started with a wine that was a blend of different vineyards of the same grape variety from the same region. We've now moved to a wine that was the same grape variety from the same year, but from two different regions. The next thing we're going to look at is a blend of different varieties from the same vintage, from the same vineyard. So we're going to look at our rosé. So our rosé is produced from 3 different red grapes. It's made from Cabernet, Shiraz and Merlot, and it's 100% off this vineyard here at the winery. Now, off the top of my head, which I'm sure is going to be totally wrong, it's about 65% Cabernet, followed by Shiraz and Merlot. Now, the way that blend ratio came up was purely 100% driven by the vineyard. In 2019, when this wine was made, we knew we wanted to make rosé, and we knew the volume of rosé that we wanted to make. We wanted to make 4,500 litres of rosé base, which is the size of our tanks here. We wanted it to be predominantly Cabernet based because of the vintage. So what we did is we went out into the vineyard and we picked the Cabernet first, followed by the Merlot, followed by the Shiraz. And what we did is we deliberately processed that fruit first and started pressing the Cabernet and juicing that off into tank. And then we followed that with Shiraz until we had enough rosé-based juice, and then we stopped. And the remaining batch of Shiraz was then crushed for dry red production into open fermenters. So that's how we ended up with that. It was purely just a matter of that's how much Cabernet was there, and that's how much Merlot was there, and then that's how much Shiraz we needed to fill the tank. So it was a nature of Mother Nature at the end of the day. Now, the advantage of using varieties like Cabernet and Merlot is the berries are quite small in comparison to things like Shiraz generally, and what that leads to is creating wines that have lots of flavour and lots of colour, because you've got quite a high skin contact to go with it. Now the three different varieties, they give different characters. You tend to get these very bright strawberry, raspberry characters from Shiraz, and then you start to move into more heavy plum characters and things like that out of Cabernet. With this wine, again, we actually treated it from a production method exactly the same way as our Chardonnay. So we would get the fruit and we'd put it in old Big Bertha up here and basically squish the grapes and drain the juice off and discard the skins. So the winemaking production for this wine is pretty much the same as our whites, but because the juice is in contact with skins for a little while, that's where you get the colour pickup. So a lot of rosés are blends because especially when it comes to chasing a particular style of colour, you'll find a lot of wineries, they may use white wines as the base material for their rosé, and then they'll blend in a small amount of red table wine to sort of dial in a colour. That is an option. This is all made from red grapes, 100%. So it's a blend of 3 different grape varieties from the one vineyard, all harvested on the same day. And that blending process happened in the tank as juice, or effectively in the vineyard as grapes, I guess. So the next wine we're going to have a look at is Shiraz Viognier. Have we all heard of Viognier before? What's different between Shiraz and Viognier? So Viognier 100% is a white grape, whereas Shiraz is red, and this wine is red. Now this blend, they come from 2 vineyards in Langhorne Creek in South Australia. They're a couple of kilometres away, but the blending process for this happens right at the start as fruit. And we aim for a blend percentage of approximately 95% Shiraz and 5% Viognier, and we chase that as fruit weight. So if we were picking 100 kilos, just for the sake of a number to make it easy, we'd go into the vineyard, we'd harvest 95 kilos of Shiraz, and then we'd pop over to the next vineyard and pick 5 kilos of Viognier, and then we crush it in together as one, as if it came off the same vineyard. Now, in this vintage from 2018, the blend percentage actually ended up about 2.5 to 3% Viognier, because we harvested the Shiraz and then we went to the Viognier vineyard and there wasn't as many grapes as we were hoping. So we actually ended up with a little bit less. But that's what Mother Nature does sometimes. We could have, if we wanted to, I guess we could have gone chasing more fruit, but sometimes it is nice to let sort of Mother Nature's intervention follow through, and you get to make the best wine possible out of what you've been delivered. Now, the reason for the blend of these 2 varieties is Viognier is a white grape that doesn't get ripe until late in the season. If you pick it early, it's very boring. It doesn't have a lot of character, it doesn't have a lot of flavour, so you have to actually let it ripen on the vine right into the end of the growing season. And that tends to line up with the same period of time as we're picking grapes like Shiraz. However, Viognier is quite oily. It has this round, rich character to it, and it's very aromatic. If you get it super ripe, it'll actually smell like tinned apricots. It's quite gregarious and quite opulent. And what we do is we crush it in with the Shiraz and we allow it to do what we call co-fermentation. That's where you ferment the Shiraz and the Viognier together as one. And it's the Viognier that allows the wine to become quite aromatic, quite floral, but that oiliness also softens the back palate of the wine. So it's sort of like getting really fine sandpaper and polishing the back of the wine, but you're achieving or starting to achieve that process right at the start from the vineyard. We then mature this wine as one for its whole winemaking process. So with the Chardonnay, we made them as 2 or 3 or 4 different parcels, and they go into all their different barrels, and then respectively at the end of the winemaking process we would blend them together. Whereas this, because the grapes were put together like the rosé where you can't remove them, so these gets treated as one as Shiraz Viognier in the barrel. The last blend we're going to look at before we go and have some fun is a wine under our Bluegrass range, and it's a wine aptly nicknamed The Blend. Now, The Blend started its life back in 2006 and through to 2010 from memory. The blend was predominantly Shiraz followed by Cabernet. So when you look at a wine label, and in this instance it says Cabernet Shiraz, the order of the varietals tells you a story about the wine. and it tells you that the Cabernet is more dominant in percentage than the Shiraz. Now, mind you, it could be exactly the same. It could be 50-50, and then if that's the case, you can pick an order. But if one is higher in percentage than the other, then the highest percentage must come first. So this is 60% Cabernet and 40% Shiraz, so thus the order. Here, when we first made this wine in the first few vintages, it was the other way around. It was Shiraz Cabernet. And it wasn't until we blended together the 2012 vintage from memory that we decided to flip those varieties around, and since then this wine has always been Cabernet Shiraz. It purely happened when Nick and I were looking at blends on the bench, just like we're going to do this afternoon, and picking and deciding which of this blend is the best wine. And the best wine on the day for that wine was a Cabernet Shiraz blend over a Shiraz Cabernet blend, and the flip side of that is sales for this wine went through the roof. So from a business point of view, it ended up being a really good decision, and we've developed a big following for this product. So we decided to continue on with that statement of Cab Shiraz, but the blend does change from year to year, but we do tend to find that around 60% Cabernet to 40% Shiraz tends to be the ballpark for that. Now, if you look at the back of this wine bottle, it has the list of regions on the back, and the different regions for this wine is Langhorne Creek, Hunter Valley and Mudgee, in that order from memory. No, I got it wrong. Winemakers, we don't know everything. Langhorne Creek, Mudgee, Hunter Valley. And that is again, just like the varietal order of regions must be from greatest to least. So in this instance, the predominant amount of wine in this is from Langhorne Creek, then Mudgee, then the Hunter Valley. Now, if there's less than 15% of something, we don't have to tell you. So if we looked back at Chardonnay, for example, if 14.9% of that wine was from another area or another variety or from a different year, we wouldn't actually have to declare that on the label. But as soon as we hit 15%, we must tell you. So it's actually very common, the Shiraz Viognier, for example, which is only such a very small percentage, it's quite common for wineries to produce wines just like that, but not tell you it's Shiraz Viognier. They may label it as Syrah or just Shiraz, and they sort of either one, expect you to know, or two, they don't want to tell you, they just want to make sure you like it. And it gives a bit of flexibility. The disadvantage of putting Viognier on the label is there is part of the market out there who don't know what it is, they don't like it, or they think they don't like it. So by putting it on the label, you may be losing out on part of the market. All right, well, what we might do is we're going to go off into the winery and search for some vino. Yep, from Langhorne Creek. Okay, so 2018, I actually only have a very small amount left, which is these two puncheons here. So we have wine from the Lake Breeze vineyard, which tends to be form a major portion of our bluegrass wines. In fact, that's what would be in this wine here. It is in South. Yes, both of these wines are in South Australia, and the River Zen vineyard Shiraz tends to form part of not only the bluegrass but also our reserve Shiraz. Fancy to pick one? Yeah, you're going to go the whole hog. All right. So here's a catch, right? You've chosen a wine from 2018, but I have nothing else from 2018. So have you as a winemaker or have you as a marketing department just backed yourself into a corner? Now, if you want to bring over one of your little canisters, because this is where blending becomes important. It's not just about what do you want to do, it's also what can you do. And that does form a really important part of our blending regime. Because sometimes you come across barrels or vintages or vineyards or varieties that sometimes it works and sometimes one thing that's very important, we must know what's in so we've got 18 Rivers Zen Shiraz, and it came out of barrel 17 FP3, and I'll tell you all about that as we go along. We've got wine. Ding, winning. All right, so for those of you playing at home, what we did is we went and had a party in the barrel room, and these guys are well versed on what's going on now. And what we did is we went and collected some samples of wines, trusty little siphon hose here, important little winemaking tool. Also really good if you want to chow or guzzle down on some good vino out of barrels. And we've gone and got some barrel samples so that we can now pop into our winery laboratory, or in this instance, into the winery. And we're going to blend together some wine. So what we've got is 3 different samples of wines that were picked at random purely by the 2 teams and myself. And the first one was a single barrel wine that's behind us here, is our 2018 River Zen Shiraz. Now you will have noticed I wrote on there the barrel number. So the barrel number for this, that this wine's lived in, is 17 FP3. And what that tells us is the story behind that barrel. So this barrel was first used back in 2017, so the 2 digits at the start. So it's not a brand new barrel, but it's certainly not an old barrel. The first letter tells us the country of origin of the timber, so F, it's from France, not from Finland. And the next letter, P, is the size of the barrel. So in this instance, it's a puncheon. So it's a 500 litre barrel that you see behind us. And the last number is the barrel number. So this is 2017 French puncheon number 3. And sitting next to it is number 4. This wine was all sourced from the River Zen vineyard in Langhorne Creek in South Australia, and the grapes were harvested in 2018. So that's wine number 1. The next 2 wines are from 2019, so they're younger than the first chosen wine, and they are both from the same vineyard. They're both from the Lake Breeze vineyard down in Langhorne Creek. Now the first one is Cabernet, so it says on here LBGT, is Lake Breeze Gum Tree is the name of this vineyard, and it's 100% Cabernet. And the last wine that I chose for you is the 2019 Lake Breeze Shiraz, and this came out of a new barrel. So it's all from 2019, that wood, so it's brand new, never used before. It's American oak, thus the A. The H for us means hogshead, so this is a 300 litre barrel, and it's barrel number 10. We looked at these different wines before and what constitutes a blend, and we know that a blend, not all blends are even. You know, oils ain't oils, as they say, or blends aren't always blends. It is 100% up to the winemaker, which in this instance is you guys, to decide on what this blend is going to be. All right, so the 3 wines that we have to start with, the first one that we decided to get out of barrel was our 2018 River Zen Shiraz. Now this wine's a little bit older than the other 2 wines. It's 12 months older. It's been sitting in barrel for a period of time. What's something that you notice about this wine straight off the bat before you even taste it? The colour. The colour is quite different. So this wine, if you compare this 2018 Shiraz to the 2019 Shiraz, it's not as bright and as vibrant in colour. It doesn't have that really bright purple hue to it. Now the best way to look at these wines is over the top of the white piece of paper. If you hold the wines over the timber or up to the yellow light, you will find it hard. So definitely make sure you're holding it over in the glass with the light behind it onto the white paper. So this is why we would normally actually use the white benches that you see there. Now this wine's got quite a lot of oak. It's been in French oak, so it has that sort of fresh cut cedar character about it. It's not as sort of sweet vanillan oak that you would tend to get from American oak barrels. It is a little bit more soft and subtle, and the palate is really quite generous on this wine. What you tend to get in this style is it's very mid-palate and back-palate wine. It's quite gregarious and spicy. It doesn't display hugely fruit-forward, youthful characters because it has been in timber for a period. Whereas you look at the 2019 wine, that is younger, it's brighter in colour and shows more depth of fresh fruits, so cherries and strawberries and raspberries. And then the last wine, well actually the second wine we got out, which was our 2019 Lake Breeze Cabernet, this wine smells quite different to the other 2 wines. It has a sort of herbaceous character about it, so it shows, think of things like freshly cut capsicums or tomato leaf. So when you crush tomato leaves, it smells like that. And that's quite typical of Cabernet. Grab glass 1. I think Deb would have, it should say B1 on the glass. Now, if you compare that to the other glass, B3, what do you notice about these wines? So the first wine, the B1, is a lot deeper in colour, and the second wine, B3, is a lot brighter in colour. What would that suggest that has occurred in this blending? The deeper colour has the older wine in it, and the lighter wine has the lighter colour in it. That's correct. So by using more younger material, we can brighten the wine up and make it more vibrant in character, or we can also use that as a blending proportion to help with an older wine. So B1 is an example of just over 85% 2018 Shiraz, so the wine out of this barrel here, and just under 15% 2019 Shiraz from the new barrels. Now, what I've deliberately done in this is to show you the influence of using what's considered a legal LIP amount of younger material into a wine that helps brighten the wine up. So here in this instance, if you have a wine that has good richness and good palate weight, but maybe the colour needs a little bit of assistance, or maybe you feel the wine needs bringing forward on the palate, then by using young wine material, that can help shift that balance of power. So we're going from an older wine that tends to sit more back in this part, and we're starting to shift it forward into the front of the mouth. But the second one I decided to show you was blend number 3. Have a bit of a taste and tell me which variety you believe this is most dominant by. Is it mainly Shiraz or mainly Cabernet?
No, I'm totally confused.
Totally confused.
I don't know where the glasses are.
So now we have a prime example of what we call pallet fatigue. And this is where you taste too many wines and they all blend together. That is a very common thing in the wine industry. Now, there is one thing or one tool that we use in the wine industry to fix palate fatigue. Do you want to know what that is? No. No. It's beer. Would you like one? There you go. Would you like a beer, Team A, Team B?
Thank you.
And a very important part of the winemaking blending process is beer. There is a saying in the wine industry, it takes a large quantity of good quality beer to make a small quantity of good quality wine. Cheers. The second wine is a blend of Shiraz and Cabernet. It is made from 80% Shiraz and 20% Cabernet. They are both from 2019. So I stuck to my rule that I gave you guys, that it all must come from one vintage. So I decided in this instance to exclude the older wine, remembering you do not have to use everything that you have at your disposal. When you're cooking in a kitchen, you don't have to use every herb and spice. So in a winery, you don't have to use every barrel. Very important thing, because it's all about making the best wine, not just about using everything that you have. I have 2 wines in front of me. One is wine number 10. I have no idea who made this wine. And one is wine number 6. Where's 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, 7, 8 and 9, Deb? You drank them. Do you care to tell me what you were trying to produce? And I'll see if I can work out whose wine. What was your target wine?
Something tasting like bluegrass.
Something tasting like bluegrass? So something tasting like the blend that we tried before? Was that where you were trying to go? Okay, all right.
I was something more softer.
Something softer.
I used the 3.
And you've used all 3? Okay, certainly nothing wrong with that. Something softer. So we wanted a bluegrass, the blend, and we wanted a softer dry red.
Yeah.
Okay, cool, no worries. If I was trying to achieve our bluegrass wine, for example, and I was trying to achieve the bluegrass blend that we tried before, we would traditionally get our base wines, try them individually like we have before, blend those together in a similar ratio that we have historically, and then start going from there and picking the wine apart. If I was chasing a wine that was softer, I would tend to lean towards wines that have been in older barrels rather than newer barrels and use that as a starting point. And for that reason, you end up with softer tannins and easier to drink styles of wine. If I was going to drink this wine tonight, I would drink wine number 10, because I find that wine very fruit driven. It's very easy to drink. I think what your target was to produce a soft easy drinking red wine, I think you hit your target more than hitting bluegrass, if that makes sense. I know that's a very broad term, but soft, and again, soft dry red or soft red's a very broad term as well. If I wanted something easy to drink and soft and elegant, I think that's nailed it. This wine, if I was to blend this by itself as bluegrass, I think it may need something to pull it forward a little bit. It's got lots of drive and lots of body. It's certainly very chewy, but I just want to see it a little bit more forward, so maybe a little bit more younger Shiraz or something to that effect. Obviously playing numbers. Maybe it's younger Shiraz that's been in older barrels, so, and a swap of those two things around. So instead of using Shiraz, for example, that's out of a new barrel, it may be using young Shiraz that's out of an older barrel to help shift that weight forward a little bit and to give you a little bit of vibrancy and a little bit of youthfulness in the wine. Because what will happen is in your oak barrels, as the wine ages over time, the barrel itself will absorb oxygen, and as the barrel is older and used again and again and again, you're getting less and less oak flavour, but you're still getting that oak integration. So you can achieve a more fruit-forward wine over time through that timber maturation.
Which one's going to sell the most bottles?
Which one's going to sell the most bottles? Now that is a really important question. And when it comes to blending, I was saying before, it's not just about what us as the winemakers wish to achieve. It's about what the customers in the cellar door, our customers at home, what do they want? Do they want a soft, easy to drink red wine? Do they want something that they need to use a knife and fork and have to put with half a slab of cow? Those two questions are so important when it comes to blending wines that very much does drive what we do in the winery. Because there's no point selling to those who want soft, easy to drink red, something that's big and bold. And at the same time, those who want something that's big and bold, there's no point giving them something that's wishy-washy. But most important rule to always keep in mind is make sure the wine's good and the beer's just as good.
And the beer's cold.
So, and the beer's cold.
Oh, that was so interesting.
All right.
I love that.
That's blending 101, guys. I know there was probably things that I missed that I didn't tell you. For that, I apologise. Before we finish up, have you got any questions about blending? All right. Just got to do more of it. All right, ladies and gents, if you've got any questions about blending, anything I didn't mention, anything I didn't talk about, tap away down the bottom, send us a like, ask us a question. If you'd like to do something like this yourself, get in contact. We might do another one of these blending sessions in a couple of months, and we can get yourself and your friends and family along, and we can put you against each other, and you never know, you might put me out of a job. So have a good weekend. Cheers.